to the Daily Bite. I'm your host, Pastor Steve Andrews. Today we get to look at 2 Samuel chapter 20, which is subtitled in my Bible, The Rebellion of Sheba. Now there happened to be there a worthless man whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjaminite. And he blew the trumpet and said, "We have no portion in David, and we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tents, O Israel." So all the men of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba the son of Bichri. But the men of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to care for the house, and put them in a house under guard, and provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. Then the king said to Amasa, "Call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed him. And David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba the son of Bichri will do for us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, lest he get himself to fortified cities and escape from us." And there went out after him Joab's men, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and all the mighty men. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba the son of Bichri. When they were at the great stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword and its sheath fastened on his thigh. And he went forward, and as he went forward, it fell out. And Joab said to Amasa, "Is it well with you, my brother?" Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him, but Amasa did not observe the sword that was in Joab's hand. So Joab struck him with it in the stomach and spilled his entrails to the ground without striking a second blow, and he died. Then Joab and Abishai his brother pursued Sheba the son of Bichri. And one of Joab's young men took his stand by Amasa and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab." And Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the highway. And anyone who came by, seeing him, stopped. And when the man saw that all the people stopped, he carried Amasa out of the highway into the field and threw a garment over him. When he was taken out of the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba the son of Bichri. And Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-maachah. And all the Bichrites assembled and followed him in. And all the men who were with Joab came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-maachah. They cast up a mound against the city, and it stood against the rampart, and they were battering the wall to throw it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen! Tell Joab, 'Come here, that I may speak to you.' And he came near her, and the woman said, 'Are you Joab?' He answered, 'I am.' And then she said to him, 'Listen to the words of your servant.' And he answered, 'I am listening.' Then she said, 'They used to say in former times, let them but ask counsel at Abel.' And so they settled a matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of Yahweh?" Joab answered, "Far be it from me, far be it that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not true. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim, called Sheba the son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city." And the woman said to Joab, "Behold, his head shall be thrown to you over the wall." And the woman went to all the people in her wisdom, and they cut off the head of Sheba the son of Bichri and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, every man to his home. And Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada was in command of the Cherethites and the Pelethites, and Adoram was in charge of the forced labor, and Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was the recorder, and Sheva was secretary, and Zadok and Abiathar were priests, and Ira the Jairite was also David's priest. This is the word of the Lord. As we start this chapter, we are coming off of the context from yesterday that David, the king, is being returned with his escort back to the city of Jerusalem. He's returning to his palace. And the Israelites got upset with the Judaites because they didn't get to partake in that escort. They made the claim at the end of the last chapter that their 10 tribes had a right, had a stake in David. Now we see in verse 1 of the next chapter, this new guy, Sheba, who calls out, "We have no portion in David, we have no inheritance in the son of Jesse." This could be looked at in two ways. You can either see this as a declaration of all of Israel, so essentially yelling out and saying, look, David has abandoned all of us. He only cares about Judah. We're not going to have any possession in that land. Let's all rebel against the king and go back to our homes. Essentially, anarchy is the cry. That seems to be more fitting because of his decree to go back to their tents, O Israel. Because the second possibility here is simply acknowledging that the Benjaminites have, as a tribe, been dispersed. As a Benjaminite, he no longer has an allotment. He no longer has a portion in David. That happened back in Judges chapter 19, and it lasted through chapter 21, as the Benjaminites had sinned so grievously that God ended up cutting them off from his people. So again, you can read about that there. In this context, they both fit, but it does seem like, because of that phrase, "O Israel," at the end of his chant, that this is likely a reference to all of the Israelites having no part in David, which isn't actually a true statement, but nonetheless is there. Before we move on from this first verse, we do want to look at the description of Sheba as being worthless. Now, admittedly, this is referring to his character and the fact that he is of no value to David. He's of no value to Israel. He doesn't care about the community around him. But there's a broader use here. This description of being worthless is actually true of all sinners. That God had created us for the purpose of caring for his creation, and as sinners, as we have this sinful nature that now seeks to care for ourselves instead of for creation, we are worthless. We are literally not doing what we've been made to do, and that does make us worthless. And yet, this then is the question to discuss with your children today. Where does your worth come from? Are you worthless? The culture around you tells you to look inside of yourself for your worth. Start to look to the different attributes that you might have, or even to, in our current cultural era, some of the LGBT things fit into this conversation. You can have pride in these things. This is where your worth comes from. This is who you are. This is your identity. And that's not a scriptural understanding of worth at all. Our identity comes from Christ. You have worth because God has declared it so with his own blood. Jesus gave his own life to buy you back. So not only do you have a worth, but your worth is greater than you will ever really fully understand. You are worth divine blood. You are worth the blood of God himself. That is your value. And it doesn't come from within you. It comes from his love for you. So it comes from outside of us, which makes it all the better, because if it comes from within inside of us, if it's about what we do, then we're going to have doubts. Am I good enough? Have I done enough? What if I was that thing yesterday, but now I'm struggling? Am I still worth something? What if my identity's changing? But if it's from outside of us, from the one who never changes, from God, who Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever, then your worth doesn't waver. It's not like the stock market constantly up and down. It's fixed. It is permanent in Christ, and that's a beautiful thing. All right, so let's continue with the text. It's a little bit of a side topic. We have essentially then an account of warfare. as Israel abandons David. So much for everything they said at the end of the last chapter. They all listened to Sheba and they abandoned the king, except for the tribe of Judah. The Judahites lead David back to Jerusalem. They give him the escort that they said that they would. The account of the concubines in verse 3, I don't know what to do with, because we don't actually know how the concubines responded to the situation at hand. That makes all the difference in this account. David has taken the 10 women and he has given them a home and put them under guard so that they are cared for. And he's providing for them, so he's providing food for them. They're set for life, but that's it. That's their life. They now live as widows. The question that everything hinges on here about whether David's deed is right or wrong is whether or not the concubines were willing participants in what happened when Absalom went into them on the rooftop. If they were rebelling against, if they were rejecting Absalom because they were David's wives, then what David is doing here is a wicked deed. He is abandoning them when they have actually done nothing wrong. They were victims. If, however, on the other side of things, they were willing participants and they are guilty of adultery, and the punishment of that is death. And so what David's doing here then is suddenly merciful. He's caring for them and choosing not to put them to death for their deed. So again, I don't know which way to take it because the scriptures do not inform us of their intentions with Absalom, just of what Absalom wanted to do. That's all we hear of. As we then move forward, then it gets into the warfare picture of things, the rebellion of Sheba, dealing with that situation. David calls Amasa, who he had just set up as king, as commander over his army. He calls him and gives him the order to gather the men of Judah within 3 days. And in verse 5, we learn Amasa doesn't do that. He delayed. We're not given a reason why. Why does Amasa not obey the king? We're not told, but he didn't. This is the first act that we know of Amasa while he's been commander, is to immediately reject what his king has given him to do. So not a good start. So David instead sends for Abishai, who he has twice now said he wants nothing to do with because of Abishai's bloodthirst. But he sends Abishai to do the work. Sheba has to be taken care of before he causes trouble, and so he sends him out with several groups. Joab's third of the army, the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and then all the mighty men of David. So that group of 37 that we had talked about before. It's the list of those men is coming before this book concludes. And so they go to Gibeon, which is 5 miles to the northwest of Jerusalem. And this is where Joab is going to set the trap. He tricks Amasa and kills him. The idea that his sword fell out in verse 8 it has to be sarcastic, because the author immediately knows 2 verses later that the sword is in Joab's hand. So this is like saying that the sword fell out of Joab's sheath and it landed in his hand. Yeah, Joab took his sword out to kill Amasa. He was willfully murdering the commander of the king's army. And the army itself has a pathetic response to it. As you come down into verses 11 and 12, they see that Amasa is dead. They see the wound. They know he's been murdered. They know this is mutiny against the commander of the army. This is a terrible thing. And so at the moment, they're just stopping and staring. And eventually one of the young men of Joab ends up throwing the body into the field and covering it up with a garment so nobody looks anymore. And they just put it behind them. They just all ignore it as though it never happened. And they instead go back to following Joab as they had done before. So not good situation there either. And then as we come to verse 14, we learn that Sheba settles in Beth Makkah, which literally means house of Maacah, which is the name of the mother of Absalom. So it's the house of Absalom's mother, essentially. Abel means man in Hebrew. So just unpacking that name for you a little bit. And the Bichrites, so his clan, followed him in, but he's also got the support of Israel behind him at the moment. They trap him in the city, Joab and the army do, and they lay siege to the city. And a wise woman comes to speak to Joab. And Joab's dealt with wise women before. We saw that back in chapter 14. And she truly does seem like a wise woman here. She's speaking um, well. She calls herself peaceable and faithful, and those do seem to be true. She is seeking peace in this situation to protect her city, and she is showing herself to be loyal to King David. So those things are fair, well spoken, and she challenges Joab, saying that he's destroying something God has given. Yahweh, this is Yahweh's heritage. God has given this to his people. Why would you destroy it? So she seems like a very strong and faithful uh, person. And as Joab gives her the situation that they're there for the rebel, Sheba, she turns him over. She convinces the people of the city to execute the one who has rebelled against the king, and thereby spare the city from being destroyed by the king's army. So that's what we see. That's what happens. And then they go home. And Joab all of a sudden is back to being commander of the army of Israel. And that leaves us with the question, does David know? Does he know what Joab's done? We still don't know if he knew of Joab murdering his son Absalom. Now we don't know if he knows of Joab murdering the head of his army in Amasa. If David knows, then this just continues to show his ongoing weakness of allowing Joab and Abishai, his relatives, and Absalom and Amnon. He's done it again and again, not punishing them for their crimes, but instead just letting it go because they're family and he doesn't want to deal with it. You could look at it as mercy. You certainly could. And it is merciful nonetheless, but we still don't know if David knows. That is something that God has done for us, though. As we have committed crime after crime after crime against him, he chooses not to punish us for it, but instead punished his son Jesus. So there is some of that can be seen. Again, I don't know how much David actually has that in mind. If this is mercy he's showing or if it's simple weakness for family. And those are two different things. But we do have that in Jesus, and it's not a weakness. It is a love for his family that he's caring for us. Benaiah, the name in 23, will be the future commander under David's son, King Solomon.